Welcome, folks, to this week's edition of Tech Sales Advice. This is the LinkedIn Live program for technical sales professionals that is live. As I like to say, these conversations are unscripted, unrehearsed, and unpredictable. And this happens to be the first episode of the year. This is season number 5 of doing this. I can't believe that I've actually been doing this for 4 years now. This is the first episode of season number 5. And I am joined today by a guest who is no stranger to this show. He's been with us before. He is no stranger to the pre-sales community. His posts are becoming, I think, more and more followed and well appreciated. His name is Brian Lewis, and he is one of the co-founders of Homerun Presales, as you can see right there on the screen. Brian, my friend, it is good to see you again. Welcome back. How are you doing?
Thanks, Chris. I'm doing great. Certainly happy to be back. I know I was looking at this as we were getting this organized, that it was something like 616 days ago was the last time. I think season 3 or maybe 2. I don't remember now.
Must have been. Yeah, probably season 3. Yeah.
No, things are great. Thanks for having me back.
I have to say and it's such a sales engineer thing to do, to actually look back and see how many days it was since you were actually on. And I think you did a little bit of math in terms of how much growth Homerun has experienced in that time. And I'm pretty sure it was 4-digit growth since the last time you were on.
Yeah, I mean, of course I looked it up. Data and metrics is what pre-sales, the modern pre-sales team does these days. But it was something like 1,300 or 1,400% growth since the last time I was on the show. So I was doing it as a fun thing to think about. All right, the next time you have me back, how much bigger is Homerun going to be, and how great are our customers going to be doing? So Awesome. It was a fun little exercise.
Awesome. That's fabulous. Yeah, we'll have to take that snapshot every couple of years. Right. And of course, you got to attribute at least some of that growth to the appearance on Tech Sales Advice, right? I mean,
Well, the statisticians would kill me if I said that, correlation is causation, but I'm going to go ahead with causation. That was the impetus for Homerun's growth. So thank you.
It's my pleasure. I'm just here to help. So Brian, we are going to talk about something that I know is near and dear to your heart, and you are one of the I'll say the few companies that have really helped driven an emerging market, which for those of you who don't know, I worked with a gentleman named Kerry Sokolsky a few years ago, and he and I did sort of a market study on tools in the pre-sales space. And we came up with a term that we were calling tools for pre-sales oversight and management. Homerun is one of the vendors or one of the companies in that space. And of course, there are a few others. And I really do think it's continuing to evolve. It's continuing to grow. And we're going to talk about what pre-sales leaders and pre-sales teams are experiencing and how they are benefiting from investing in those tools, some of the questions they should be asking, some of the experience that you've had. You've been doing this now for a couple of years. Before we get into all that, Brian, though, in the unlikely event that we might have any, and by the way, folks, if you're out there listening live and you care to say hello, please feel free to do so. If you have a question for Brian or myself, please feel free to ask. But Brian, in the unlikely event that somebody listening now or somebody catching the recording is not familiar with you and the company, do you mind just taking a moment and sort of introducing yourself a little bit more broadly?
Yeah, certainly. So I started my pre-sales career when I came out of graduate school back in 2005. I ended up in an SE role. It was kind of hybrid SE/AE role at the time. It was a small company. But then as the company grew, I was an SE team lead, team manager. That company got acquired. I was at the parent company leading the pre-sales team. And then I've been doing Homerun for the last, few years now. So it's been an entire career in pre-sales spanning kind of all of the different roles that you can do within pre-sales. Of course, now these days at Homerun, we're a pre-sales software company, so get to work directly with other pre-sales teams now around their best practices and processes and metrics and so on. And of course, getting the software in place to support all of that.
Fabulous. And by the way, I'm seeing some people chime in. Robert Key, Melanie, nice to see you. Nikhil from Berlin, Diana from Chicago. Thanks for saying hello, folks. It's good to see you. And of course, folks, anybody else who's out there that cares to say hello, please feel free to chime in. So, Brian, when Carrie and I did our report a number of years ago, this market was very much just in its infancy, and it's still only, I think, in the early stages. But back then, I think there were certain benefits that we thought people could expect, or organizations could expect, from these pre-sales management or pre-sales oversight tools like this, such as team management and skills development, skills management, creating consistency, et cetera. As you reflect on the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, wow, we have a lot of people chiming in. So nice to see you. Even Chris Maybe from Pre-Sales Collective is out there. Big shout out to Chris, Shane, Don. Good to see you all. As you reflect on the past couple of years, what have you seen as arguably the top 3 to 5 benefits that companies and pre-sales leaders are realizing from investing in these kind of tools, these capabilities?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're right. It certainly has evolved. And I know even when you and Carrie did the initial buyer's guide, you had a number of different categories of tools. I know worked really hard on how to best segment out the market in terms of the tools and the value and benefits that they provide. I think, historically, the big draw was reporting and metrics, right? Pre-sales teams were, didn't really exist as a formal go-to-market function. It was starting to formalize and says like, oh, how do we measure ourselves? What should we be looking at? And so the initial draw was metrics. And that's great. Very attractive, very easy to build out metrics dashboards. And so that's where a lot of people started and vendors started as well. But then you start to realize, okay, well, in order to power metrics, you need the data to power the metrics. It's like, okay, well, where do we get the data from? So now we start adding in fields and Salesforce or CRMs and other ways of spreadsheets or whatever to try and get the data. But to get the data, you need the team to actually put stuff into someplace. And so, okay, now how do you get the team to do that? And so you got to mandate usage because it doesn't really help the SE or SC or SA. So you can carrot and stick it a little bit, but the evolution has kind of gone from, we do need metrics, but more importantly, we need the data to power the metrics. And more importantly, we need a tool that actually works the way kind of a pre-sales team actually works day to day. So I think the evolution has been that recognition and the tool sets. I mean, certainly Homerun being one of them has kind of started actually, fortunately, from a tool that was designed to enable an SE to be efficient and effective, every day on every deal. And so we kind of started that direction and then built up to the metrics side of it, which has worked really well for our customers. But I mean, there's value in the metrics, right? The classic, you can't improve what you can't measure. So that piece has to be there. There's value in the data coming out of that, because we look at how does that data help power a pre-sales team to know what to do and how to be better, be more efficient, more effective. But then we talk a lot about pre-sales teams having data that no one else has, but everyone wants. So your sales team wants that data, your product marketing, your product team, your CS and post-sales team, your C-suite. So part of that value is the cross-functional value that pre-sales teams can generate around the org. And then I think although I'm mentioning it third, I think it's actually arguably the most important part is the value of when you've actually got a process and tooling that supports SEs to do their job better, you see win rates go up and sales cycles go down. So basically it always comes down to, are we hitting our revenue targets or not, right? And can we do that with the most efficient mechanism, meaning the use of our team? That's really the real value is, we're hitting targets because we're closing deals more effectively. We're closing them faster.
Yeah. By the way, Barry Ross says hello as well. He represents another company in the space. I want to pick apart some of what you just said. Really, you talked about reporting and metrics, and in order to have reporting and metrics, you need data. And to get the data, you really need the team to be involved. One of the things you mentioned is pre-sales tends to have data and insights that the rest of the organization would not only love to have, but would benefit from.
Yeah.
What is an example of some of the data that the pre-sales tends to have an insight into or have access to that others in the organization don't, such as sales or marketing or product?
Yeah. I mean, we can kind of go through, each of those. I mean, I'm actually going to be co-presenting with one of the Homerun customers, Jerry Levison over at Samsara at the upcoming Demo Fest West Coast about this topic around how pre-sales teams earn their seat at the sales forecast table, because the pre-sales team knows what's going on during the technical evaluation stages where the sales reps just do not have that insight, or at least not as detailed as the pre-sales team. So being able to say, where are we at from a technical fit, technical blockers, the POC or POV status, when is that POC, POV going to close, which is then a proxy for the close date. So you start talking about pre-sales teams having information that says this deal is going to close, not going to close, or the confidence level, and also the timing of it that is different from what the AE is looking at, right? So like that already is a huge sharing of information that pre-sales teams are doing with their sales counterparts. I mean, we can certainly go through one by one to all the different, teams and kind of give an example like that, but that's like a really key one.
Well, and let's pause on that one for a moment. Why do you suppose, or why have you seen that data tends to get locked without tools like these?
Well, I mean, it doesn't get into the process as much because, again, kind of traditionally the pre-sales team said, I don't do the forecast. I don't put something in commit. I don't choose the close date. I show up and do my demos and I run the POCs. That's my job. I don't have a stake in any of the rest of it. That's my rep's job. Okay, that's not true anymore. I mean, as an SE, you have a role to play in helping guide the forecast because your leadership is using that forecast to do cash flow planning and make investment decisions and growth plans and headcount planning. So I think when you get an SE and then all the way up through the pre-sales org chart, realizing that, no, you actually do have a vested interest in making that forecast as accurate as possible because your C-suite is planning off of it. You want to start surfacing that data. The problem then is like, well, how? Normally it's, if you're my manager, you only know what's going on with my deals unless you ask me all the time. Or maybe there's a spreadsheet. Maybe there's a field in Salesforce or HubSpot or whatever CRM. But again, it's sort of not built, just structurally teams have not been organized or have the tooling in place to make that capture and then the surfacing up of those insights really efficient. Again, until today, really.
Yeah. Have you seen any negative feedback or negative response from any of the sales organizations or from sellers, or maybe some negative or less positive information is being exposed and they're shining a light, or is it generally well received because it's sort of opening the doors to some of this information that otherwise is hidden?
Yeah, I mean, at least across our customer base or other pre-sales teams that I talk to, there's always the concern of like, oh, I don't want to throw somebody under the bus, to use that phrase, but it doesn't really happen. I mean, that's not the way it's happening, I should say. Yeah, if you could do it inappropriately and call somebody out on a call and embarrass them, I suppose, but that's not the way it's done. And pre-sales teams know that they know better. I mean, when we talk about it, we talk about building up to, because if you think about, okay, if I'm an SC, I'm not in the forecast call, right? My leadership is. And if I'm a team lead or manager, I might not also be on that forecast call itself. So there's always like the level of communication. If I'm an SE, I should be paying attention to what my AE is saying in terms of forecast category and close date. And if I disagree, my first step should be to go to you as my AE and say, hey, Chris, I don't think so. Here's why. And we should be working on this together because we are in this together. Now, if you and I disagree and you feel the pressure as a rep to get something in the quarter because you need to fill up your whatever, and I disagree, there's an escalation process. I'm going to go to my manager and say, hey, Kevin, I think this deal really shouldn't be in commit, but Chris really wants it there. I'm just letting you know. Right. And again, there's tooling to help surface that up so it doesn't have to be, direct outreach. And then you're going to go to, Kevin's going to go to their sales manager and have that conversation. And eventually it should make its way up. But you want to have that bottoms up approach. There should be no
Mm.
surprises where something's just called out like on a call, right?
Love
That's
that.
not the point. Yeah.
Love that. Well, and I think therein lies one of the key things too is removing surprises
Yeah.
from the end of the quarter.
Yeah.
Right. And by the way, I mean, as an SE, I don't want to be the one who's accused at the end of the quarter for either withholding information or not being transparent. So this gives me the opportunity to just let the data speak for itself.
Yeah.
Right. And make sure that at the end of the quarter, there aren't surprises. Somebody, it just says LinkedIn user, so we don't know who this was, but I think this is a key point, getting consistency in the data and having it used in the forecast.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this notion of consistency. What is it that these tools are doing to help create a more consistent message across the board?
Yeah. Well, we're starting to see some adoption or adherence or acceptance, I suppose, of some common like pre-sales, signals into the rest of the organization or into again, if we focus on the forecast, but things like SE sentiment, technical blockers, technical risk factors, some things like that are becoming more common. Again, they're form of metrics, I suppose, or at least data. So that's helpful. Just as a pre-sales world community, everybody's trying to figure out how do we measure ourselves and what's important to track. And again, how do we share this information? What's important for the rest of the org to know? So it's a natural evolution of the field and the role, I think, that's happening. And then, of course, the tooling there from a consistency perspective. I mean, of course, I'm going to advocate for our own tool whenever I can. But at the end of the day, what's more important is there is a place to put it. So a field in your CRM, great. A spreadsheet or Google sheet, okay. A great tool like Homerun, fine. Whatever it is, there needs to be some place to say, this is important. We're going to start tracking it. Now, from a tooling perspective, the biggest issue that most companies run into is, okay, I gave you the field. Why aren't you updating it? And the fact that it's not embedded in your day-to-day workflow, it's a thing you have to go do on a Friday afternoon, kills the process. It kills the data quality because you're really busy and you're going to do it when you remember, and your manager's going to, ask you to go do it, and you're going to do it on occasion. And you kind of get a garbage in, garbage out data issue. And that's where, again, the evolution of what happened, I think, in just the pre-sales tooling market, of the focus on the metrics and realizing you need the data, which means you need something to fit in the day-to-day. So starting points, though, is what do you need to be tracking and why? Where do you actually track it? And then most importantly, how do you embed it in the day-to-day workflow of the team, both all the way up the org chart?
Yeah. Love that. By the way, that was Marjorie who shared that comment. So Marjorie, thanks for that. She's one of the people in our space that she only needs to give her first name, and everybody knows exactly who she is. So well said, Marjorie. By the way, Brian, let me just push our pause button, folks. I'm speaking with Brian Lewis. He is one of the co-founders of Homerun Pre-Sales. We're talking about the benefits and the value of a sort of a new emerging sort of market called pre-sales oversight and management tools, one of which is Homerun. And Brian, you mentioned the importance of having quality data, and the only way to get quality data to drive meaningful metrics is to have the pre-sale team, the individuals actually putting in and tracking their data and having it become part of their day-to-day. So what advice do you have for SE leaders who maybe are struggling to get their team to engage with the whatever tools they happen to be using so that they can capture that information?
Yeah, I mean, so there's always going to be process, right? Some things we just have to do as part of the job. I don't like it, but I just have to do it.
Yeah.
Now, that's not great because that'll eventually wear on people, and it's, people are jumping jobs and people don't want admin burden. So like there's always a risk, but there's part of it's going to just be the process itself. Part of adoption of a process is going to be the reasons why behind it. You tell me to do something, okay, I'll do it. But if you help me understand why it's important, why it's valuable, how it helps the organization, how it helps me, I'm going to be more into it if I understand the why, and especially if I agree with it, because it's well thought out. So the process and the reasons why.
Yeah.
The tooling piece, I mean, I again, from a tooling company, I do feel very passionate about this. I mean, that is really the key to a lot of this success, because it's not the same to say I've got a field to track something. And the example that I always like to use is, we just got through the winter holidays, whatever holidays those might be. Imagine the holiday table feast, right? You've got your friends and family, it's decorated, a nice tablecloth and dishes all around, the silverware's out and flowers on the table and candles burning and the food's on the plate and everybody's smiling, there's music playing and it's wonderful. Just think about that experience. That is like how you get process and tooling coming together. It's what you really want and it feels good and it works. Mm-hmm. That's not the same as saying, okay, I'm going to give you the same experience. Here's a tabletop and 4 table legs. Here's 8 chairs, 8 plates, 8 forks. There's a frozen turkey in the freezer and there's some stuffing on the stove. It's all the same stuff, right? Well, technically, yes, but the way it's all put together is dramatically different. And that's where a lot of companies do struggle with this, is to say, well, I've got a spreadsheet for that, or I've got some fields for that, but there's more to it than just the place to track it.
Yeah.
And that's, yeah.
And, an aha moment for me, Brian, is you mentioned that SEs need to think more about the business, and they need to think more about the forecast, and they need to think more about how their work is contributing to a bigger picture. And then hearing you sort of tell that story and give that analogy, one of my takeaways, I think, from this conversation is that by implementing one of these tools, really you're implementing now process. Mm-hmm. And in order to drive that process, you really need to explain the why. Yeah. And I think in doing so, the takeaway for me is it ideally it really empowers SEs to feel more involved in the ultimate success of the sales organization and ultimately the revenue organization and the company. Yeah. And it helps them see how they fit into a bigger picture. Am I making too much of this, or is that a reasonably good takeaway?
No, I think that is a huge takeaway, is that I think the modern pre-sales team, and from SE all the way up to the leader, has to look at themselves as not just like the classic sales support piece that people always like to talk about, but I think to be proactive and say, we are a major driver in the success of the organization. We are the critical link between customer acquisition cost and lifetime value. We can influence sales and the forecast, product marketing, product roadmap, customer success and post-sales and their success, and the C-suite and making smart, strategic, data-driven decisions.
Yeah.
Pre-sales teams can do all of that. And when you try that hat on, or all of those hats on for size, you're like, wow, there's actually a lot of value we've got that we can contribute. And now we start looking at the process, the data, the sharing, and the tooling to make all of that, to manifest that into the value for the organization. And that's very empowering, I think, when you think of it that way, versus we show up and we do a demo, we run a POC.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. We are major influencers on the success of the overall organization.
Yeah. How important is it for pre-sales leaders to already be operating in this manner or thinking about their role in this manner before they start thinking about actually looking for or bringing in a tool? It seems to me that if the first step in the process is to look for a tool without really thinking through the process and the approach, and even demonstrating to their leadership the methodology that they're trying to follow, that the tool is just that. It's just going to be a tool. Would you agree that the most successful organizations, or particularly leaders, they're already doing this to some degree?
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, certainly you don't know what kind of tool to get until you know what you're trying to do and the reasons why behind it. So, certainly some thought. I mean, the way we think about it is every pre-sales team is doing pre-sales today. So it's not like, oh, tomorrow we're going to start doing pre-sales. We're already doing it. There already is a process. It may be loose, it may be ad hoc, or it may be very, very structured, but either through training or whatever else, we have a process we're following. There's going to be there's already data being captured, whether it's one field on Salesforce or my side little Google sheet, my notes on the side, there's data being captured all over the place, right? Yeah. So everybody's got process, everybody's got some form of metrics, everybody's got some form of data and some form of tooling. Now, certainly if you've got some thoughts around what a better process would look like, you want to think about that. How can we get better? What's been working? What's not been working? But in order to know what's working or not working, you might need some data to support that. So now you're back to, okay, how do we get the data? I do think that a critical mistake that a lot of teams think is, well, we're going to go ahead and build this out in spreadsheets or task tools or in our CRM as a starting point. Then we'll look for a tool. Okay, well, you already chose the tool then. You already chose your CRM or a spreadsheet or a task tool. So again, I'll advocate for the better tools that can evolve and grow with you as your needs grow and evolve. But at the end of the day, all of the tools there are tools that are being used already. I still agree with the general point though, having some thought around what that to-be state would be, get it down on paper, so to speak, before you start investing in any kind of tooling or any kind of CRM customization or even a Homerun tool. Now, vendors are going to be there to support you. Like, we are experts in doing this. We take teams from like no process and help them put a great process in place by way of our tool. So that's a big part of the consulting work that we do for some of our customers. So like the right vendors can help with that, or obviously like yourself in the 6 Habits, like somebody who doesn't know how to think through this very well is going to follow the 6 Habits framework, and kind of that's going to be part of their process before they start looking at a tool to support it.
Yeah. Are you seeing a pattern of either business drivers or requirements that people are coming to you and your organization? And I'm assuming they're probably looking at other tools in the space, but is there a pattern of what it is that they're trying to achieve, or what their drivers are, or is it very random?
No, there's some consistency, because there's been again, I'll kind of use like historically, it was all about activity tracking. That was the thing. And the primary reason was because we need data to drive certain performance metrics and utilization and attach rates and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think the varnish came off of that when you can go back to like, to get the metrics, we need the data. For the data, we need, that kind of stuff. So that has changed now, in terms of like, we still want those metrics, but looking at enabling the team to do their job better. And so now it comes back to, is the team enabled in the right way? Now that could be training, 6 Habits, that could be enabled with the right tooling like a Homerun, that could be enabled with some other kind of tooling.
Right.
But kind of getting down to that core central focus, because the byproduct of that is everything else that you want. The data, the adoption, the metrics, and so on.
Yeah. Yeah. Folks, I'm speaking with Brian Lewis. He is one of the co-founders of Homerun Presales. We're talking about tools in the, quote, pre-sales operations and management space. If you have any questions or comments for him, please feel free to ask. Otherwise, Brian, I'll continue. One of the things, and in fact, I've had a number of SE leaders say to me, quote, Chris, I don't know if I need a separate tool for pre-sales, and even if I did, I'm not sure I could justify the cost. What do you tell, or what advice do you have for pre-sales leaders who are told things like, just do it in Salesforce, or just do it in whatever HubSpot, or whatever they happen to be using?
Sure. I mean, if there's a big focus, right? Economy is still tough. There's a big focus on tool consolidation, because sales teams went crazy with their tools, and a tool for this and a tool for that. And so there's a thought around, well, we must consolidate tools. Part of that is because we have too many tools that aren't being used. We're trying to reduce budgets. But even somebody that says, well, we're just going to use our CRM. Okay. Not true, because your SEs have side spreadsheets and they have Slack and email and a Google Sheet on the side and Notion or OneNote or what Google Keep, whatever it is. There already are 10 different tools, even though you think you're only using one, because everybody goes to, well, we have Salesforce. We have fields in Salesforce. That's what we're going to use. But you're ignoring all of the side tools. By ignoring that, what you're really ignoring is all of the really rich data, information, and insights that is lost to your organization forever. Because you don't know that I would have gotten my little side spreadsheet or OneNote. And if I leave the organization for whatever reason, yeah, technically the organization has access to it, but nobody's ever going to go back and read all of that. So you've lost out on tons of value. Again, not just for the pre-sales team or not just for that deal, but for sales, product marketing, product, post-sales, C-suite, by having all of these side tools. So there's I think, a misperception of, well, we're going to use our one tool, Salesforce, and then you're ignoring all of those side tools, which are just the ones that we all have access to. And that is a huge fatal flaw, I think, for a lot of teams, or a blind spot, I should say, for a lot of the teams.
So we're kidding ourselves. If we think we're just going to use the CRM, we're kidding ourselves. So let me extrapolate then that a little bit further. So success in implementing one of these tools ideally means that as a pre-sales team, we're no longer using the side tool, the spreadsheets and the Google Forms and whatever else and ideally we are in fact doing everything sort of in this centralized operating hub, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for tool consolidation, right? I mean, all the research out there, and I'm no expert in it, but of context switching, just in general, like in our daily lives, between whether it's email to Slack to our phone, or between phone and the TV to whatever it is, like context switching is really detrimental to the processing of information, right? Our brains can't handle it very well. So I'm all for consolidating tools. And even in a platform like Homerun, which by definition is a tool consolidation platform, because we're bringing together all those little bits and pieces that a pre-sales team is using on the side into one place. There still is going to be, somebody who says, yeah, but I'm comfortable with the way I do it. And as long as the information gets in there, fine. Right. So the direction of tool consolidation, 100%. Also part of this is, even though we talk about a tool or a solution like Homerun, the CRM is still, for most organizations, the primary system of record for the data. So data still has to go in there because Claire is using it for the forecast and this tool is using it for that, and quotes are going 100%. Out. And so you're not going to get around that, right? And all the tools are going to talk to the CRM and push data back and forth. Like that's the lowest barrier to entry to have a pre-sales tool. So that's not going away. But it's back to the holiday feast around the dining room table. It's sort of the way that it's done is what makes the big difference. Otherwise, everybody's got a way to manage tasks, to update Salesforce, to put in notes. That stuff is not why you're buying it. It's the way that it comes together to enable, from an IC up to the leader, to do their job every day.
By the way, I love that analogy. If I didn't know better, I'd say you were a sales engineer telling a story like that, because by the way, you've actually made me hungry, and you've made me now eager for Thanksgiving, which is months, almost an entire year away. So pretty well done on you by that, by the way. And now every time I think of one of these tools, I'm going to imagine everybody gathering around the table for this beautiful holiday dinner. So you've created a great image there. We've talked quite a lot about the metrics and the benefit to the manager and the importance of unlocking that information and supporting forecasting and that sort of thing. Let's talk a little bit more about the individual contributor and the actual teams and some of the benefits that they're realizing. Some of the things that I think Carrie and I hoped that organizations would realize as a benefit from these tools are more rapid onboarding and ramp up time, or ramping up to speed, more consistency with which things like discovery, demo, POCs were executed, the ability to make sure that key activities or tasks or follow-ups don't fall through the ground. is this happening? Are people actually realizing this benefit as a result of implementing these tools?
I mean, I can't speak broadly to the rest of the vendors out there. I can speak to the Homerun customer base of 100% yes, because it's brought together all those bits and pieces into one place. So if I'm an SE, I can easily capture all my details, my warning signs, my highlights, my follow-ups, my notes, my Salesforce updates, my current, all of the stuff that I'm doing anyway in one place makes me more efficient. The context switching is to a bare minimum. Nothing slips through the cracks because I've got everything I need to do. The collaboration is there with my team. So yes, I mean, the efficiency is there, the productivity is there, but also the performance is there. Because again, I think sometimes the misperception is like, these are just productivity tools. And like, yeah, they are. There's no doubt about that. But they are performance tools. When you do all the right stuff, when you don't forget to follow up with the buying team with some technical information, you are accelerating your sales cycle. Because if I forget to do it, you're going to maybe wait a week or 10 days, and then you're going to ping me and say, hey, Brian, did you end up ever send me those API docs? Because that was like a next step for us. It's like, oh man, I forgot about that. Well, that's a week or 10 days where it's further out into a next quarter, next year for a deal to close. A reorg could, that in that 7 to 10 days, wherever that extended sales cycle is when a reorg happens, or budgets suddenly get cut, or all kinds of things can happen. So by making sure that we are following best practices and a repeatable process, and making sure nothing slips through the cracks, we are both, yes, being more productive, but we are actually being better technical sellers, more effective, better building better relationships because we have more relationship data that we've learned and are using in the sales cycle. So yeah, there's productivity, efficiency, and performance improvements for sure.
Yeah. I'm just glancing at Marjorie's last comment here. She said, great discussion. I'll share it with everyone. Great discussion. Super important to see that SE role is much more involved in the success and outcomes of customers during the sales cycle. Yeah. Tooling is important in that process. Very well said, Marjorie. Very, very well said. Brian, do you think, and as a software vendor, I was once upon a time sort of in that space, right? And the one thing we always wanted when we sold software is to get our customers to a point where they just couldn't live without our software, right? There were just certain things that were so critical to what they did that they couldn't imagine not having it, right? And even when I was a consultant back in the days when I was an enterprise architecture consultant, there were certain tools that I used that I just couldn't imagine living without. Yeah. If I were to go and pull, and we'll start with the ICs since if I were to go and pull some ICs, are there any aspects of these solutions, do you think that they would respond and say, oh my gosh, like now that I've become used to it, now that I depend on it, I couldn't imagine not having it. Does anything come to mind for you?
I mean, for Homerun, and I did a LinkedIn post about like the snowball effect of SE adoption.
I saw that.
That's a key thing for us is, I mean, the way we focused on the IC first and foremost is you do have again, I'm not trying to promote Homerun here, but you do have a tool that an SE says, finally, I have everything I need in one place. This is the tool I imagined could exist, but I didn't know did exist. Because it's not a tracking tool. We always say, if somebody's coming in and say, I just want my team to go in on Friday afternoon to track a bunch of stuff, we're not the right fit. Like, there are plenty of tracking tools out there. Go get one of those, but ultimately that's not what you really want anyway. What you want is something, you want the data, and we already been through that a bunch of times. So it's back to the way it's put together, because it can't just be a tracking tool. It can't be an admin burden. It can't be something I have to remember to go do on a Friday afternoon. It has to work the way that I work. So the new tools, at least I'll say like the Homerun style tools, are delivering that for the SEs in terms of like the adoption is there because it is a tool that you want to use. But the key thing is it's just got to work the way an SE works, right? Because we're too busy to do anything else. We're too busy for the admin burden. And if I'm good at what I do, you're going to let it slide as my manager because I get the job done. So you don't have the data, but I get the job done. And that's why at the end of the day, these tools aren't so much about efficiency and productivity as they are performance. What you really want is for me to work with my AE and the territory or account types I'm supporting, hit quota, hit targets. That's ultimately the goal. And everything else has to enable me to do that better.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Brian, a couple questions are actually coming in. The first is, what type of rejection reasoning have you gotten from potential customers except for reason of budget? Good question. We don't see who asked that, but good question.
Yeah, I mean, and even budget is, you can always work around budget, right? The right business case can go a long way, even in these kind of tough economic times, and even with very strict CFOs around spend. So budget as an initial objection is overcomable. At least we have a great business case process we go through. But the other one is going to be, we already have a sales force, right? That's like a classic one that we always hear. And okay, how's that working for you? Do you have high quality data? Does it actually help your team? And sometimes we'll be like, yeah, we get the data. We have some good reports. Okay, what about your SEs day to day? How does it help them? Where's all the rest of their stuff? Well, it's in OneNote and some Google Sheet. Okay, good. So you're once again losing out on all that value, all that insight to drive all those other teams. So one of the objections kind of be things like, well, we already have tools, no budget. We're in a tool consolidation phase. Great. That's what Homerun's going to do for you. We're going to consolidate tools by definition. That's what we're doing. So most of those are overcomable. There's some work internally because a lot of pre-sales teams, we always talk about this. We're great at helping people buy our own products, but as a pre-sales team, we're not great at buying products ourselves. We don't know. We don't sort of eat our own dog food, drink our own champagne. Take your pick of analogy there. It's just hard to sort of turn it inside. But all of those things about, you can get over those hurdles by the why. And Peter Cohan has a great process for kind of thinking through like those critical business impacts and the needs and the what you're going to do and the delta in performance and a kind of framework to think through some of that stuff.
Well, and that is exactly the thought that came to mind for me is start with the why, right? What is it that you're actually trying to do? Or what is it that you can't do that you wish you could? And what's preventing you from doing that now? And what's the value to the organization of being able to do that? Right? I mean, if your why is, well, I think this will help us get more organized, and as a result, we'll be more consistent, and we're gonna increase sales. Okay, well, by what percentage? And what's the value of that, right? And what's preventing you from doing that now, right? So, love that.
Yeah, and that's, big picture. If somebody says, well, I want to have I'm looking at Homerun because we want to have a better, more structured process. And I know you've got your, the shovel all the way through the shade in the tree, stories. But like, okay, well, but I agree with you.
It's always right here by my desk.
Wow. Love it. Good. I agree. You want a better, more structured, consistent process. But why? Well, we want to make sure we're doing the right stuff on each deal. Okay, why? Well, because we're investing a lot of time on deals that actually don't close. Okay, so if you didn't do that, what would you do instead? Well, we'd invest more time on deals and move them along faster. So almost always it's going to come back to, we want to make sure we can achieve and hit our revenue targets or exceed them. The other part that we hear a lot is around like the activity tracking, which has been the more traditional use case. I think most pre-sales leaders have moved beyond, or at least recognized it's time to move beyond just activity tracking as the thing you're trying to do. But it's usually because when they get asked by the C-suite, Chris, do you need more headcount? Or are you okay? They don't know. They have a sense of the team being.
I always need more headcount, but can I prove it? Right.
Yep. Or if I feel like I need it, they're going to say, great. Just like we don't have budget for tools, we don't have budget for headcount. Prove to me that you need it. So the data and the activity tracking is a way to sort of help answer those questions. But back to why? Why do you need more headcount?
Mm-hmm.
Is it because you have a more aggressive revenue target and you feel like with the resources you have, you're not going to be able to achieve it because you're not going to be able to service the deals? So once again, we're back to almost the same thing every time when it comes to the sales organization is revenue, revenue, revenue. Now, net new revenue. And of course, there's all the discussion around the importance of renewals and the upsells and cross sells these days with, again, tough economic climate, other companies not buying software. Therefore, we have to sort of make sure we can retain what we've got.
Yeah.
But still, it's revenue, revenue, revenue.
Amen. Yeah. Amen. By the way, Lewis Meyer Lewis, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly, just asked a question. Lewis, we're going to answer that in just a moment, but there was a question that somebody posted before yours that I want to make sure we spend just a minute on, and then Lewis will cover. If you can hang around for a few more minutes, we'll cover your question as well. With having a unique perspective on client and internal needs as an SE, and the amount of value we bring to multitude of processes, well said. How do you start building out a framework or best practices for SE resource allocation? Very good question. Mm-hmm. And then the following, the division between being a cost versus a profit center feels more relevant than ever right now. Whoever asked that, thank you. Great question. So, and I love this idea of building out a framework or best practice for SE resource allocation. Anything to share? Anything come to mind, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, if we use that, that idea of the pre-sales team having data that no one else has, but everyone wants, and all the different teams that we've kind of been talking through, to think through where the value, this is like the higher level conversations that an organization needs to have, and pre-sales can be one of the teams that kind of leads that charge. But there's going to be the direct revenue impact. If my SE works on this deal and we close it, that's $500,000, into revenue. That's great. That's very transactional, even though the transaction may be 9 months long as a sales cycle. That's direct. But if we also start to say, okay, but the same stuff that we're learning on our calls about a feature request that you asked me for, and we say, we don't support that today. I could say we don't support that today and move on, or here's a workaround and move on. But the moment I've learned that, if I share that with the product team and I decorate that with the 20 other deals our enterprise team has also heard it on, and that adds up to $52 million of business across all those deals, that's real deals, real data, real dollars that a product team can say, wow, we really should work on this, especially if we're going to lose all of that because we're missing this feature. So part of it is to think about the framework is to think about each of those teams and what are they trying to do. Your product team is trying to build the most competitive roadmap possible, and they need data to support that. Otherwise, it's guesswork of what the market potential could be, and we're kind of inventing a feature that we think people will need. Or you can come in with real deals, real dollars to help guide that. Your product marketing team, they are trying to put the best messaging out there to showcase your product to the right ICPs and personas. Well, guess what? That's what they're trying to do, but what defines a good technical fit or a bad technical fit because you work on these. So sharing that data with them helps empower them to be more successful. And we could go through all of the teams, but if you think about those other teams and what they're motivated by, what they're trying to do, and then think, what do we know? Whether or not we actually capture it yet today, that's kind of back to process before tooling. What do we learn? What does our team learn throughout a sales cycle that would be valuable to those other teams? And then let's start working as a way to capture it and share it.
Love that.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that. By the way, the individual who asked that question, another thought that came to mind for me is that there's a book by Bill Balnave called Tech Sales Wasabi, and he provides some really good ideas on how and really even a framework to as a what a leader, an SE leader can do to build a framework around making the SE organization more of a quote profit center and create more of a strategic organization within the company. So
well, and I think that
really
the
good.
Profit side of it is back to the efficiency, right? Which is if you've got so many of my hours as an SE or as a resource. Now you can allocate that to direct deals. You can allocate that to renewals. You can allocate that to working with product marketing or with product or with post sales or transitioning. And so thinking about, and this is, your own kind of attribution model and value model is back to, if I spend time working with the team as a separate project, that takes away from revenue, but it may be the right investment for the long term.
100%.
The other part of it is, if you can make it easy for me to capture the data and share it, then I don't really have to invest any more time because I'm already learning it anyway, in which case, just make sure there's a mechanism to share it. That's going to be a very efficient use of my time because I'm already doing the work. Now you just got to share the information as opposed to have me go do something else.
Amen.
Yep.
Amen. But by the way, Melanie mentioned the feature of a view into the cumulative dollar amount associated with product feature is gold. Very, very well said. All right, let's get to Lewis's question. This is a good one. As a sales ops leader, and by the way, Lewis loved the sales ops leaders in the world. Cost, time savings, opportunity acceleration, win rate improvements. That's the ROI that he's looking for, understandably. Do you have, this is his question, do you have data that support a central tool as opposed to just using CRM and a spreadsheet to drive this ROI? Great question, Lewis. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is true. I mean, it is a hard sell, right? We work hard with our buying teams around how did they get over that hurdle, because they are going to get, depending on the role, a CIO or a RevOps leader say, well, we can do that today, right? And look, shout out to the RevOps and sales ops teams. They are incredibly hard workers. They get all kinds of requests coming from all kinds of teams, and they're struggling. They struggle to, and do a great job with it, of trying to build out the right kinds of tooling to support the needs of the business. Now, I'll argue that the right tooling is not always a customization in the CRM, right? There's lots of different tools to choose from to do that. But shout out to the RevOps teams. It's not an easy job. It's very demanding, and everybody wants something yesterday. So
100%.
Never a knock on those teams. Give a pat on the back to those teams if you've got them.
Yeah, 100%.
But yeah, I mean, no, there is data around it. We've got case studies and metrics around that in terms of win rates going up and sales cycles going down and time saved per person, which can be reallocated, and improvements in onboarding processes and things like that. Also, the adoption rates of the tool and the usage of the tools is a key part of it. The level of mandate that management has to do is a key part of it. So there's a lot of different ways to sort of think about the improvement. And also, no surprise, a lot of our customers, especially the larger, more enterprise customers, they've gone down the route of trying to do the DIY path or the customization, or they have existing objects, custom objects in Salesforce. It just doesn't work the way that they work. The fields might be the same, but again, it's not baked into a whole process. And so that by itself is already saying that those processes don't always work for every organization.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, I'm going to go back to the holiday dinner analogy, right? I mean, do we have a table and chairs and turkey in the freezer and right? Just some sort of building blocks, or is it an orchestration?
Yeah.
Right. So love that. So we're going to wrap things up here in just a few minutes. Unbelievably, we've been at this for over 50 minutes, and it feels like there's at least 3 or 4 questions that I was hoping I'd get to, and I'm not going to have a chance to get to. There are 2 more things that I want to cover briefly. Sure. One is an analogy. I don't know if I've ever shared this analogy with you, and I'm curious to see if I'm onto something here with this analogy, or I'm just going too far off the reservation. Okay. So the analogy that I thought of with regards to this sort of space and investing in the pre-sales teams, whether it's with tooling or otherwise, is a restaurant.
Okay.
And the comparison I make between like marketing and sales and pre-sales is marketing and sales is basically the front of the house. Sure. It's your hosts or hostesses, right? It's your wait staff, the greeters, the people who are visiting you at your table and taking your order, and they come out and deliver and make sure everything. But your pre-sales is, quote, sort of the back of the house, which in a restaurant is the kitchen.
Sure.
Right. And so, for example, if you were going to scale a restaurant, you wouldn't just add tables and wait staff without considering whether or not the kitchen can handle the increase in patrons, right?
Yep.
Nor would you ignore equipping them with the best tools and the best equipment and the best process, right? It would be ridiculous to put all the effort and energy into point of sales and right. So why are we not investing, quote, in the back of the house? Now, I know we don't like to think of ourselves as just completely subservient to sales. Is this an analogy that works at all, Brian, or am I too far off the reservation?
No, I think it can work, and there's variation. I mean, there's a lot of different styles of restaurants, right? So I think conceptually, some companies are going to be just like you described. The SEs are the cooks in the back of the house cooking out, cranking out really good food, which is like a demo or a POC environment or whatever it might be. A variation would be that the SE is also more like the sommelier, if you're a wine drinker, which is you've got somebody who's sort of coming and taking the order and checking in, but then somebody shows up and says, so tell me what's going on here on the table? What are we all eating tonight? How can I help? I'm going to make some recommendations. I'm going to let you try it a little bit. I'm going to, oh, you didn't like that? Okay, let's try this other one. And then it's going to complement the experience that you're already having. Another variation would be you kind of have like the quote unquote chef's table where you're like right up with the chef and the chef's talking about the food and what's happening and you're watching it be prepared. And that's more maybe like the little form of buyer enablement thrown in there now because you're part of the experience of it and you're learning and they're asking. So I do like the idea. And I think the pre-sales teams are going to come in the form of chefs, line cooks, sommeliers, a little bit of all of that, depending on the organization.
Love that. I love that. And again, why would we would never think about scaling a restaurant without investing in the, quote, that side of the house.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's your bigger point of you wouldn't scale just by putting more stuff up front. You'd scale the other part that actually makes it happen, so to speak. I mean, you have to have a great host or hostess and a waiter or waitress that's going to sort of make the experience and lead you through the process and do the administrative piece of it, at some point bringing menus and bringing the check. But you wouldn't not scale and invest in the chef staff and the kitchen and, again, leveling up your experience of how you engage with the buying team.
Amen. Amen. Love that. All right. So it's nice to know that I'm not completely and totally crazy. Yeah. So awesome. Folks, if you've hung around this long, thank you so much. Love all the questions and comments. Brian, I did have another question, but I think we're just going to run out of time because I was going to ask you about AI, but I think I may need to invite you back to just have an entire conversation around AI. So I got a few votes of confidence on the restaurant analogy. So Sankar, I hope I'm saying that right. And Ben, thank you very much for making me feel like I'm not completely and totally crazy. Brian, any thoughts in closing as we wrap things up?
No, well, yes, I think big picture, especially based on this discussion, if you are on a pre-sales team, whether you're an SESCSA team lead, manager, pre-sales leader, for 2024, be thinking about how do you fit into your own team? How do you fit into the broader set of teams? What are you doing day to day to enable those other teams with the data? If you're not capturing it or writing it down, how can you write it down? And I just really do encourage everybody to go out and explore all of the pre-sales tools. Everybody wants to give you a demo. Go talk to them. You can tell them, look, there's no deal here. I'm just curious. They were all going to talk. I will talk to you. It's about exposure and seeing what the art of the possible is, even if you're not ready to go buy something today. Go educate yourself on what's there because it is transformational when you see what's possible with the tools out there today.
I love that. Those words just ring so true, Brian. And I love that you said that. And you're right. Look, there is so much opportunity, I think, in this, not only this particular segment of the market, but just for pre-sales professionals and pre-sales leaders to continue to up our game. And I think we are all going to do that together through the technology that's emerging, through the other, obviously the training that's available from
Yep.
me and organizations like me, Presales Collective, et cetera. So, and hopefully these conversations will continue to drive that narrative. Folks, if you are not following Brian on LinkedIn, I encourage you to do so. He puts out great stuff. I do these LinkedIn lives, and then I look at all the stuff he does with a touch of envy, because I don't have the bandwidth to do all the writing that he does. I encourage you to check him out. Check out Homerun Presales online as well. If you are interested in following this, you can actually follow the hashtag Tech Sales Advice. Of course, you can go to Tech Sales Advisors to learn a little bit more about what we do. And by the way, if you like these conversations, please feel free to share them with others. And if you know of anybody who has not been on this show but should be, please reach out to me and let me know, or send them a link to it and say, hey, reach out to this guy, Chris. He does this very candid discussion on LinkedIn, and you'd be a good guest.
Good stuff.
Brian, you have officially helped me kick off season number 5, 2024. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Those of you who hung around to the end, thank you so much for being here. And if you stuck around for the recording, we will be back next week with episode 2 of 2024. In the meantime, have a good week. Brian, I wish you the best. Have a great year.
Thanks, Chris. Bye, everybody.
Thanks all. Cheers.